Dorian Brew commits to Oregon, not Ohio State. Let's talk about it. Dorian Brew commits to Oregon over Ohio State, who many thought he was going to be committing to. In fact, there were, I think, 3 crystal ball picks in for Ohio State on 24/7. I think one of those was an old Steve Wiltfong one, so I don't know if that really counts. But definitely, Bill Kurlick thought he was going to Ohio State, and normally Bill is pretty good with his crystal balls. Normally, he's willing to take those off if he finds out that he's not going to a certain place. But what makes this kind of weird is that if he wasn't going to Ohio State, many people thought, well, it's most likely USC. And some people thought, like me, LSU could be in contention as well because LSU lost a cornerback commit earlier this week, and it's possible maybe after that decommitment, LSU scrambling a little bit more, maybe offering a little bit more NIL, maybe promising some playing time, things like that. But at the end of the day, does not happen. He goes to Oregon, and it's not too hard to believe. Oregon is a good program. Obviously, they have a lot of momentum in recruiting right now. They're coming into the Big Ten favored right now by some services. I think FPI, ESPN FPI has them favored to win the Big Ten right now. So, there's a lot of reasons to see why he would want to go to Oregon. Let's look at some of the reasons why he did not choose Ohio State. I think one of the big reasons, and I think it's the one that many people would be able to guess and realize, is that Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offord are both committed to Ohio State right now. And that's the number 1, number 2 cornerback in the country. I mean, this is a duo that is most likely going to be considered the best cornerback duo, cornerback combo, whatever you want to call it, in the country someday. And many people were hoping Dorian Brew would maybe be the nickel or something like that, a part of this duo that would make them a trio, one of the best, if not the best trio in the country someday. But obviously, does not look like Dorian Brew wants that to be the plan right now. There's also some thoughts of NIL, and I hate doing this. Like, I hate using NIL as an excuse because at the end of the day, Ohio State's NIL is fine. If Ohio State wanted to pay him the most money out of anybody, they could have. Quite frankly, Ohio State chose not to pay him as much as some other places were offering him. And you just can't make an excuse for that. If Ohio State was not prioritizing Dorian Brew financially well enough, then that makes sense why Dorian Brew would say, well, I want to go somewhere where I'm prioritized more financially. I want to make more money. And I don't think you can get mad at a kid about that. I hate using NIL as an excuse. I hate saying, oh, he just went to this school because he got a bag or whatever else. And there are some instances, there are some cases like that. But at the end of the day, your school, your coach should be operating in such a way where they have enough NIL to be able to pay the players that they want to come in. Even if they're not the highest bidder, they at least have a bid in for that player that still makes it an attractive destination. I think personally, if for some reason Naeem Offord, whether it was with Alabama or Auburn or Oregon, if he did flip or if he did decommit, I think Dorian Brew would have been offered a lot more NIL from Ohio State. But since that didn't happen, it seems like, maybe they just didn't have the NIL. Maybe they just didn't prioritize the NIL enough. We'll never truly know. But at the end of the day, the NIL definitely wasn't as high with Dorian Brew being the 3rd cornerback in the class rather than him being the 2nd with a Devin Sanchez or something like that. A loaded roster is also playing into this as well, right? Ohio State has a ton of talented cornerbacks on their roster. They have Jermaine Matthews Jr., the freshman of the year, corner all freshman team or something like that. He got some kind of freshman honor last year. Bryce West, Aaron Scott Jr., Miles Lockhart last year, all committed. Calvin Simpson Hunt is a super underrated cornerback who's going to start for Ohio State next year. I'm nearly positive about that, whether it's, in some kind of outside corner, whether he does a little bit of nickel work, who knows, but I'm almost certain he's going to be starting for Ohio State next year. And then you also have Davison Igbinosun, who many people think, sure, he's going to the NFL, but it's always possible he could come back. He could be one of the leaders on this defense. Who knows? When it comes down to it, Ohio State has a lot of talent in the room, and I don't think playing time would have been as easy right away for Dorian Brew at Ohio State as maybe it would be with USC, LSU, or Oregon. And that's not to say anything about Oregon's roster and say that they have bad cornerbacks or anything like that. It's just that they don't have maybe the cornerbacks who are hyped up as some of the guys that are currently in the Ohio State room. And if we're being honest, this is a pitch that a lot of schools will give certain recruits. Hey, that school is loaded over there. You're never going to see playing time till you're a junior, till you're a senior, something like that. Look at our room. We don't have nearly as many highly rated guys. You can come in here and do a great job. I personally kind of hate that pitch. I think you're kind of dogging on your own guys when you do it, but at the end of the day, they're just trying to get the kid to come in and choose the school, so who can really blame them? Let's look at a little bit of the social media interactions. I thought some of these were interesting. Devin Sanchez says, "We still going to put belt to A these next couple years in the shoe." Talking about Oregon, I think most certainly there. That was after the commitment happened. Then Devin Sanchez responding to FF Buck, love this follow on Twitter, saying, "Reminder," and then he puts Devin Sanchez and Naeem Offer, the number 1, number 2 corners. So just reminding everybody, we do have 2 highly talented corners in the class already. It's not like Dorian Brew was the number 1 corner on the board and we lost him. Still hurts, don't get me wrong, but it's not like he was the number 1 corner on the board. And Devin Sanchez says, "We know," laughing face, laughing face. And then Burma's comment here kind of leads us into the next piece. "Dorian Brew has committed to Oregon. Tough loss for Buckeyes in a time when everything has been going very well." It's true, things have been going well for Ohio State for a little while, minus the Jordan Davison commitment to Oregon. Chase for complimentary cornerback for Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord continues for Tim Walton. Now, I've been told Ohio State doesn't need to worry about the third cornerback by some people on Twitter. I'm not saying you need to worry, but I do think it's something that the Ohio State wants to fill. I don't think Ohio State wants to leave this class with only 2 guys planning to play cornerback. So let's talk about the options here that Ohio State can go with. All right. So does Ohio State circle back on Blake Woodby? Blake Woodby decommitted. He is somebody that has not committed to any other school yet. At least at this time, he hasn't committed any place. I don't know if maybe while I'm making this video, he commits someplace, but could Ohio State circle back? Maybe say, "Hey, Blake Woodby, you thought Dorian Brew was coming in. He's not coming in. Come back. You can have your spot back." It's possible. Do they prioritize Brandon Finney, who they were kind of in on a little bit there, but he did commit to Oregon? Do they go back and maybe give him some more prioritization and say, "Hey, we want to talk to you about coming back again"? I don't really think that one's likely, but it's definitely something to think about. Do they play the long game and try to flip Brew? Now, this is the most interesting one to me. A lot of Ohio State insiders, and granted, these are just Ohio State insiders. I've not read the Oregon ones or the USC ones or anything like that. Or I've not read this. I have read them. I haven't read this from them yet. But a lot of the Ohio State insiders on all different kinds of message boards, on 3, 11 Warriors. I don't remember if Buckeye Huddle had said it or not. I don't want to put them out there because I don't know. But they're saying this recruitment isn't over. That, yes, Dorian Brew did commit, but this isn't necessarily Dorian Brew not talking to anybody else again. It's not like he's Devin Sanchez and he's going to shut everything down and just tell coaches, "Stop contacting me. Don't talk to me anymore." And if that's the case, I could definitely see Tim Walton saying, "You know what? I have a good relationship with this kid. This kid's from Ohio. This kid has a mother who ran track here at Ohio State. A lot of good connections here for Ohio State. I'm going to continue to try and flip this kid." Now, he picked Oregon for a reason. We just outlined a lot of the reasons why he didn't pick Ohio State. But it always kind of felt like Dorian Brew wanted to be at Ohio State. Maybe the things weren't aligning. Maybe the things weren't exactly correct. And you do have to think about those things. But it always kind of felt like he wanted to be at Ohio State. So could Tim Walton take this up to National Signing Day and try to get him to flip, try to get him to decommit, and at least, start thinking about some other teams? Again, can they get him on an official visit at some point? Obviously, they're not going to get anything right now with it being the dead period, but come time during the season, would they be able to try and figure out, can Dorian Brew come back for some kind of official visit? It's possible. It's possible for sure. I think that this is most likely what they're going to go with. I think that Tim Walton is not going to give up on Dorian Brew as long as Dorian Brew has a phone number that Tim Walton can call or text. He's going to be there. Even if he changes his phone number, I think Tim Walton's going to be in his DMs on Twitter, right, and trying to get him to be in contact with Ohio State at the very least and try to get him to see, hey, you're missing out not coming to Ohio State, being committed elsewhere. This kind of feels like I think it was the Rivals board dotting the I where I read this from, and I completely agree with it. But it's kind of felt like the Justin Scott commitment, right? Justin Scott commits to Ohio State. Ohio State had a lot of momentum. It made a little bit more sense considering Justin Scott was from the Midwest area, Chicago, I believe, or at least somewhere around that area. And so it kind of made more sense, but then he flips and he goes down to Miami months later. Could the same thing happen? Could Ohio State figure out some more NIL funds? Could Ohio State miss out on a Riley Pettijohn or, dare I say, a David Sanders Jr.? We don't want that to happen, but could they miss out on somebody and then they go back to Dorian Brew and say, hey, we want to inform you how much we prioritize you. We're going to up the NIL deal. Who knows? Maybe that would be attractive to Dorian Brew. Sometimes these NIL deals aren't just about making money, but sometimes it can communicate to a kid how much teams or coaches or programs are prioritizing a kid. And it feels good to be prioritized like that. And so even if Ohio State has two guys like Naeem Offord, Devin Sanchez, who are making a lot, for Ohio State to say, we're going to up what we offered you before because we think you're that good of a player, because we think you're going to play snaps for us. Maybe not your freshman year, but you're going to play snaps for us your junior year, your senior year, and it's going to be impactful for us. We're willing to pay you money even when you're just working to get on the field. The final direction they could go here, which I think if it doesn't work out with Dorian Brew, and I think this is what they'll go with, is they just don't get a third cornerback. They just say, all right, hands are clean, not going to get a third cornerback. All right, listen, you got a good amount of guys coming back for next year. Davison Igbinosun could come back. I'm not predicting that to happen. I hope he doesn't come back. I hope Ohio State has such a great year. He goes off to the draft and gets drafted day 1 or 2, and he's off to the NFL. That's not because I don't want Davison Igbinosun here. I just think if that happens, it means Ohio State had a really good year. I don't want another year where everybody's coming back because they didn't accomplish anything, right? You have the senior, Lorenzo Styles Jr., that's number 2. You have the 2 juniors, Jermaine Matthews Jr., Calvin Simpson-Hunt. Those are 4 guys. And then you have the sophomores, Miles Lockhart, Aaron Scott Jr., and Bryce West. I know that they're actually freshmen this year. I'm just projecting a year after this year because that would be the year that you would have the guys come in. Like I said, Devin Sanchez, Naeem Offord, those guys would be freshmen in this situation. So would Ohio State be comfortable with a cornerback room of that size? And I also don't want to forget him, Deontay Griffin, Archie Griffin's grandson. He would be in that room as well. He is a walk-on. He doesn't have a scholarship that I know of. But still, he's in that room as well, so we don't want to disparage him, especially being the grandson of the great Archie Griffin. But it's definitely possible for Ohio State to say, we don't need a third cornerback. The cornerback room isn't that bad. And for Tim Walton to say, okay, we're going to definitely get 3 this next cycle, or we're even possibly going to try for 4 in this next cycle. And honestly, I was looking at Ohio State's class. It wouldn't surprise me if Deshaun Stewart comes in, the New Jersey safety, who is committed right now. Ohio State has 3 safeties committed right now. They're going to try and get a 4th, whether that's Messiah Delhomme or Trey McNutt. They're going to try to get a 4th. It wouldn't surprise me if they look at Deshaun Stewart and say, you could play some nickel. Kid is 6'2", 185. He's kind of too big to play on the outside, so he's not going to be a corner out there. But he's big enough. He could play on the inside. He's fast enough. He could cover some wide receivers if he matches up with them out there. He's big enough. He could cover tight ends in that kind of situation. And if worse comes to worse, you could sub him out on 3rd and longs and put a smaller outside corner in there to go against those wide receivers. So I don't think Ohio State is in the worst situation here by saying we're only going to take 2, because you do have Deshaun Stewart, who can kind of be that hybrid safety nickel role with his coverage ability. Don't forget, very good 7-on-7 player, has done a very good job of covering guys. I don't think it was it for South Florida Express. I don't remember what team he was with, but he's done a very good job covering guys in 7-on-7, and so he is more than just a hard hitting safety or something like that. Like I said, 6'2", 185 could be a good piece there. So that's kind of my take on the whole Dorian Brew thing. Let me know what you think. Do you think Ohio State's going to continue to go after Dorian Brew? They're going to try to get him to flip. Do you agree with me? Deshaun Stewart could be the third cornerback, or do you think that they're going to go after a Blake Woodby, a Brandon Finney, something like that? I'd love to hear your thoughts on the situation. Maybe just your thoughts overall on what happened with Dorian Brew. Do you think my reasons are correct on why he didn't choose Ohio State, why he didn't choose to commit to Ohio State? Do you think there's additional reasons? Or are you an Oregon fan and you're like, JR, you're wild, man. You don't know what you're talking about at all. He just loves Oregon. And that's the reason he picked him. He just loves Ducks. Well, maybe it is. Hey, like and subscribe. We do appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.